there was a moment where the SDR leaders were running the same playbook and they failed. And then they went to the next place and they failed. That AI is predominant in their systems, and how they queue everything up, and the ability to provide information SDRs have never had before. The ability to give them both like educational information and signals that will tell them when to reach out to someone and how to be relevant. Those things are real. The fact is that what we need is that last mile to be people. That has been the breakthrough.
Welcome to the B2B Roundtable. I'm Brian Carroll, and I'm excited to have our guest today, Craig Rosenberg. Craig is the Chief Platform Officer at Scale Venture Partners. And what Craig's doing is he's helping them build their go-to-market platform so that they can bring this expertise to help software companies drive growth. And I've known Craig quite a while. We go way back in terms of what we were doing with early days of B2B marketing, complex sales. And I started following Craig's blog, The Funnelholic, going all the way back to 2008. So Craig first shared a pipeline council that they're doing with the top SDR leaders in enterprise and software sales. And then the other thing is Craig did a post with Jason Vargas talking about the taste layer and bringing that to the SDR rep. And what I'm excited about, Craig, for us to talk about is, the more things change, the more they're the same. And I just wanted to hear for you, what's coming up in the pipeline council that the rest of us aren't talking about yet?
Well, first, I thought it would be important for the audience to know that, yes, you found me through the Funnelholic, but everyone found you through your book. Was it Lead Gen for the Complex Sale, I think was like the name?
Yeah, it was.
And that was like the book. I mean, yeah, that was like you were the like OG out there with the book and talking about it. So I think that's amazing to bring up. And it also, even the fact that you brought me here because you saw these posts, like for everyone who's wondering if it's important for you to share, what you're working on and thinking about on social. I mean, look, that's how I met Brian in the first place. He had a book and was doing the speaking circuit. I had a blog. And then recently, he brought me back here after he read one of my posts on social. So there is a lesson in your intro in and of itself.
That is true. And we could tell you also do a podcast, which is awesome. So welcome. Let's go back to what's coming up in the pipeline council that the rest of us aren't talking about.
I have two councils. I've got one where I brought together like the folks that have figured it out. That was, I'll talk about that in a second. Then I've got my regular councils, which bring people together who are still people trying to sort this out. And Brian, like from our conversation before, I'll just go on the negative side, is like, it was hard. It's hard because there's a moment where SDRs were basically human robots, right? They were basically conveyor belts of information. So it was about how many emails could you get out? In some cases, how many calls or how, then the messaging was sort of one message. It was all about output. Or I think you said they were activity based, right? They were machines. So we had that moment. We had to come out of that and sort of accept that the original iteration of AI here and the way people sort of thought AI would work would be to somehow automate that motion, which was a highly generic, activity-based motion. So we had this sort of, let's call it, there was this run of SDRs being these human robots and delivering activity. And frankly, let's face it, they got meetings. And then everything changed and then it got really hard. And then we said, well, we're going to solve it by using AI to deliver what they were doing as robots. And that didn't work. So everything, got really confusing. And that's why I put the pipeline council together at the Rosewood, was so I can start learning more. And I work with a woman named Christina McMillan, who I've worked with for years. She was at Topo with me, but she was an SDR consultant for years. And I said, you know what? We don't know anymore. We got to go figure this out. So we bring together the pipeline council, and it's really interesting because we actually do know. The reality is the most important thing now is trust building, right? Humanity and relationship building. What we missed for call it 8-10 years was that, because we didn't need it right now. The truth is that what you would say, I know I've been watching you and reading you and listening to you for a long time is it's, wait a minute, like that's what I was talking about back then. But the truth is I think we kind of lost sight of that. Now, I will say there was some really interesting things I learned from the Pipeline Council. So I'll give you an example. This guy, Joey Lopez, he's at Glean, and this guy amazed me. So I'm just going to give you this example of what he does. So most of everything is AI and automated. Who they're going to talk to, right? What types of companies, those things are served to them. Because, by the way, Brian, one of the things that was also happening during the SDRs as robots phase was they were choosing their own accounts. They were going into Zoom Info and just downloading names and sending emails. There was no thought process on who we should talk to. Yeah. And then the AI will research the company, help them identify both, educational information and signals. The AI actually for them sends emails. What he believes is, can I focus on one thing? And so his choice is to focus on the phone, which is a highly converting channel for them. And so they train and they practice this all the time. But ready for this? So he's a football wrestling guy. So what they do is every day, the SDRs come in and they huddle like a sports team. He's like, look, you don't just practice before the game. You get in the locker room and you go through the game plan. He's like, but we actually practice. So let's say that day they're going to call CIOs. So they get trained on the CIO persona, right? What they care about, what their challenges, day in the life. They get trained on the type of messaging that works in under different scenarios. Then they go practice. Then they come back and then they huddle, go. And then they all spend the whole day calling CIOs and that's it. And then they optimize against it. It is just brilliant, right?
Because it is brilliant.
I've never heard anything like, and so I told him, look, that is better than what me and Brian used to do. That's like, you're able to do this with each other. By the way, in the practice, they're using the, sales simulations so they can practice against the CIO persona, which is AI. So everyone asks me, I'm like, look, I'm in a venture firm. We love AI, but it's that last mile, which is the human, which is the thing
that's
we're
right
there. And he trains them on the human and they go in and they have these conversations and they listen to calls together, maybe like a halftime and go listen to the calls and then they optimize. And then that day they just do really well with that type of person. And I thought, that blew my mind, right? It was incredible. The other things that I saw that were really just highly personalized direct mail. I guess there's these groups. Sorry, people, I forgot the name of one of them where they'll actually create custom, gifts for someone based on what they care about. So an example would be if, developers have a high predisposition for Legos. Well, there's a bunch of groups that do personalized Legos. They can create, a Lego and send it to them. Or there are others where they knew that, someone was way into archery, and so they'd send them things around archery. It was like these highly personalized gifts and the conversion rates. The most important thing, guys, is we have to live by the numbers, even if it's a great idea. Sometimes a great idea. Well, I don't know about you, Brian, but I have a great idea every week that doesn't work.
Sure.
That's
part of life.
Exactly. I think that now that we're our age, we can relate to this, but the conversion rates are really high and, and everyone say, well, it's a gimmick. No, it's not a gimmick. It's personalized. If you send me a stress ball, that's not going to work. Right. But if you show me, that me, then, that's going to be infinitely more effective. The other thing that was surprising to me was there was a guy in there in cybersecurity, which is one of the hardest markets to email. He improved email reply rates to 6%. We haven't seen 6% since 2021, and what he did again was he made the emails more relevant, more personalized. He tore everything down and rebuilt it back up in a way that was more highly relevant and highly personalized. So if I had to leave with a theme is there's some really fun channels and tactics that I learned about. But at the end of the day, I think the key is that, that last mile. And I think, that's what leads you probably into the taste layer, which is like, humans, everyone wants to know what humans are going to do. Well, the humans are there to make sure that, we're building a relationship, that we are, being relevant, that this is something tasteful that we would send to someone. And that's what we saw. We went around the table and that's where we learned all this. That Joey Lopez example, what do you think of that? That was incredible.
I love that. I mean, going back, and Joey took it to a level when I was running BDR teams. I created something I called How to Talk to Me, which was doing what Joey was doing, but the role play, we didn't have AI to do role play. It was our best educated guess on a persona.
Yeah.
And we did focus on just calling that persona because people would be reaching into multiple people within an organization. And I just think getting that level of specialization in sports, you need to get reps in, but they were practicing the reps before they talked to a live person. And then they were able to go deep, which I think is brilliant because that's how people get good, having that focus, having the understanding. And it also helps younger, less experienced people who haven't had the life experience, maybe calling executive, to actually know how to talk to them.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, one thing on the experience versus not thing, it's a challenge because we do typically use less experienced SDRs in this process. But on the other hand, it was interesting. So we had a really successful. He's not allowed me to talk about who he is ever. It's a long story, but he's got a highly successful SDR team that's scaling to, let's say, 100 of them. Right? Remember when everyone told us they were dead?
Yeah.
And his issue with the experienced folks is that they couldn't approach the buyer the way he wanted to, which was in a much more personalized way. They were actually, if you think about it, if someone was highly successful during the SDR's robot phase, are they really more experienced?
Really, they aren't. Yeah, they're experienced being repetitive and doing activity, but when it comes to actually connecting with people and being relevant and all that, I mean, that's something you need to train, and it's a skill. It's something that people need to develop, and it doesn't just happen.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I hope that was interesting.
Yeah, super interesting.
I was going in the numbers everyone was giving me. I'm like, who's hiring? Everyone raised their hand. It's nuts because everyone told me that people were just. I think, Brian, we've seen this before though. I'm trying to remember. There was a moment where everyone tried to kill the SDRs, and they keep trying to kill them. The enterprise sales reps say, "Oh no, those old guys, they don't know anything," and it's like now they're getting hired like at prices. I mean, they're unaffordable, but it's the same thing. It's your same theme. You need AI to help everything go faster for the human, but at the end of the day, that relationship is built with these people. And so we're seeing that across the board. These AI companies came up through PLG, through
Yeah.
a lot of, frankly, amazing. I mean, some get to 1 billion without hiring go-to-market, but guess what? The minute you want to talk to people that aren't coming to you, you need people.
That's right. So you had shared something, I think this came from Adam Schoenfeld, about 39%, and maybe it's higher, of AI companies are hiring SDRs. And so, everyone thought these companies are building the technology that's supposed to replace SDRs, supposed to replace salespeople, but they're still hiring. So what do you make of this?
All right. So first of all, you are right. It's probably higher because that was 6 months ago when Adam did that. So he looked at 150, I think a little more, top AI companies. 39% were hiring SDR and SDR leaders. Okay. A year ago, I was talking to experienced SDR leaders who were crying because they weren't going to hit their mortgage. Now they're getting paid more than they ever did. Those top AI companies, frankly, look, I'm in the venture, but you see their numbers, it's extraordinary. And they're doing it without, by basically, people catching fire from a brand perspective very early on, and people come into them, and typically a PLG motion. I'm all in favor of that. What we're seeing now is that whole group, that cohort, is now trying to get into enterprises, new markets, even mid-market that didn't necessarily come to them. At a certain point, you have to do this. And they're not just hiring SDRs, they're hiring, like I said, experienced sales reps that were supposedly dinosaurs and out of the business. So there's that. The second thing, though, is what we just talked about, which is I actually do believe that there was a moment where the SDR leaders were running the same playbook and they failed. And then they went to the next place and they failed. So they're in defense of the sort of fall of the SDR leaders had not adjusted. Now they've adjusted, and now you're seeing folks starting to share successful implementation. Before, like, it was a return to, humanity in many cases. But I will say that AI is predominant in their systems and how they queue everything up, and the ability to provide information SDRs have never had before. The ability to give them both like educational information and signals that will tell them when to reach out to someone and how to be relevant. Those things are real. The fact is that what we need is that last mile to be people. That has been the breakthrough. We tested a lot of stuff, and so if you take both things happening at the same time, which is trying to get into the harder markets that require people with a new enlightenment on, how to approach SDRing these days.
You've said this a couple of times, bringing humanity back. And what would you say unmistakably human looks like now, today?
Oh, man. That's a really good question.
I read probably a dozen things on LinkedIn, someone saying, how not to sound like you wrote by AI. And I'm like, why not try writing? Why not try actually writing yourself in your voice? Because there's a backlash happening too,
Yeah, I know. You're right. I think there's been two moments that sort of turned people off to the generic messaging. There was the SDRs as robots just flaming the market with emails, right? And then there was like we said, oh, well, we could solve this with AI. And then now, even today, I got emails this morning that were clearly not written by a human. And we're surrounded by AI messaging all over the place. And so when we get a human, then that's something that is really relatable. I think that's right. I'll give you an example. You said, try writing. I use AI every day. And I tried originally to have AI do my decks and my emails to folks. And then I said, okay, well, that doesn't work. And then someone said, well, it's easier to be an editor. And I used to say that. And then I tried editing it and it was too hard. So I went the other way. I use AI, let's say I'm prospecting. AI will tell me what kind of things work. So it can help me with the structure, the rubric of an email, like, what types of things work in the first sentence, stuff we train on. It will follow, look and say, hey, look, like the best reps are doing this at the top. That helps me a lot. I ask it for ideas. So in bullets, that's my new thing. I get these great ideas, but then I write it. So I'm still faster, but more importantly, I'm better. And the AI does help me a lot, but I just couldn't have it write it anymore. If it's AI patterned or templated, it won't work. And I'll give you an example of humanity. I was talking to John Barrows, and he said, well, like, young SDR gets this signal about a merger and he's never seen a merger before. And he goes and writes about it. And I'm like, dude, you can't do that, right? Like, I'm not going to answer. So it's like, you want to use AIs. Well, tell me what happens in a merger. Tell me what things might be, happening at this organization. Now I'm going to take it. Now I'm going to write something more heartfelt, right? Like I might have even written, I don't know a ton about what happens in mergers, but I do know, just having experienced this, that, and the other might be happening in your business. And that's why I feel like, we might have this ability to have a conversation about this use case that we solve for, or whatever that might be, or what I've seen, or what our organization has seen. Just being humble and approaching it that might work. The other way is to do your own research and be okay with not being perfect there.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good example from him, because that would be an example we would use tech. We would say, oh, and then it'll identify there's a merger. Then it'll put together a message. And it's like, yeah, but that person got 200 messages that all look the same. that show zero understanding of that person and what they might be going through. And so what's your differentiator? How are you going to do it? And like, I think that's when we talk about humanity. We have to be able to tell them, look, it's worth talking to me. And that actually has to be done by you, the person. I think it's one of the reasons I'm surprised people answer their phones, because I certainly don't, but we're seeing the data and it does work. But I think it does work when you connect, because ultimately that's two humans connecting, having a conversation, and being able to talk it through, which says, no, I'm not talking to a robot.
Yeah. And I think there is a lot to what you're saying. My first job as an SDR, I was calling to set up appointments for sales training. And my first day, I knew nothing about sales. And I was frustrated in the week. And Julie, the manager, said, Brian, just be people with people. Why not own the fact, you're 22 years old, you don't know anything about sales. And the irony is you're setting up appointments for sales training. The point being, the admission of who you are and what you don't know can open up possibilities. I could talk about, I've learned so much in the sales training already. I think there's this point of we still need to go back to learn what is unmistakably human and do more of that. And I wanted to go back to when you did a meeting at the Rosewood. Was there anything that surprised you the most or was counterintuitive that you came away with?
Counterintuitive? Well, I actually would say the most surprising thing was that I wasn't surprised. I mean, that's cheating, but like, I think everything ended in the same theme that we just discussed. I'm surprised people still answer their phones. They do. There's tech to go do that. By the time we got to, let's say there's 12 people in the room. When we got to number 4, I was like, I got it. And then they kept going. I'm still got it. By the way, I'll give you another one that was like big. The SDR thing kind of blew up like a year and a half ago. Now it's back. And it's like, what were the things that we forgot? Well, one, they want to get promoted. So like one of the people in the room's like, one of my keys is that I have like 70% of my SDRs get promoted into sales. And I'm like, okay, that's amazing. And she's like, and now more talented people come. They stay longer because they know that they're going to move up. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's an old theme that's come back. I actually, maybe the thing to say is that what's old was new again. A lot of the fundamental things that we used to discuss, and remember there was this moment where right at the tip before we entered into like just craziness on the SDR side, there was a lot of themes we were talking about with SDR team building that, I kind of forgot about, and that they came back. So I don't know if it was surprising. It was great to hear,
AI has allowed us to scale activity, but it hasn't allowed us to scale relevancy unless you use it properly.
Yeah. I actually, I do have a fun one for you.
Okay.
I have a fun one and a one that we already knew, but is really important. The fun one was, and this did not come from the Pipeline Council. I like to just talk to people. So I'm, these hot companies that are sort of breaking down doors. I just want to talk to whoever's doing it. So there's a company in New York called Attention, and one of their highest converting channels is the SDR taking a gift and walking to and in the doors of their target account. And
Wild.
So I called him. He's like, yeah, it's the field SDR. And basically it's like 100%. And by the way, they also get a LinkedIn message saying, hey, the Attention guys just brought that. And he's like, it's that motion. Because guess what? We give donuts. It has our name on it. Or he's like, we could give whatever. But the fact that we made that personal effort of having the person that's trying to reach out to so-and-so show up at the admin's desk and hand them that, it's like, that is the ultimate in conversion. Now, you can't scale that. But like, look, you and I, you're the complex sale guy. I'm like the enterprise. I keep telling people, guess what? Getting into AT&T doesn't scale. It is like you have to find your way in and then find your way across and then continue to do that. And so like that one, that was a surprising channel for me and really interesting. The other thing, though, I will say, this is across the board that I did not mention before that people are doing a lot better is ideal customer profile work. I knew this at Topo and people didn't believe me because it was like the gold, everything was about meetings. They didn't care what. And I kept saying, no, like, okay, forget the term account-based marketing. Don't worry about it. The most important thing is there are accounts that are the absolute best fit for you right now. Why would we spend time on anything else? And it was funny when I'd go in and they'd say, can I look at the forecast? I'd say, well, let's run it against the ICP. And it was obvious. You're getting a 37% conversion rate against the ICP and a 17 against other. So that should tell you everything. And what we see now is with data and the ability to go do this, a lot of these successful teams are actually doing a way better job of choosing the accounts. The second part to that is with signals and these things, you're able to figure out when to reach out to them and what to say. Those two breakthroughs are huge.
Yeah. I think back, you brought up my book. By the way, it's coming up in 20 years since that book came
No
out.
way. I'm
But
getting
yeah, I
old.
know. Can you believe it? Yeah, I can't believe it either. So 20 years ago, in 2006. But back then, there wasn't an abundance of data. We now have an overabundance of data. It's what do we do with it? We can move from thinking ICP is how you build a list to no, your ICP is how you know who's relevant and you focus on just those. And you aren't trying to build the biggest list possible. You're trying to build the most relevant list. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, I know.
What are you seeing right now as you look across your portfolio that a lot of us might miss?
Well, I'd say to everyone, you got to stop firing your CMO just because things are tough out there. It's the movement there has been extraordinary in terms of people getting shipped out. There is a point there, which is like messaging matters. I think it's really hard right now. It's been a killer. It's just like CMOs who are pretty good sort of fighting with the organization, trying to find the best message and not getting there. Because look, I work with startups and that's a hard game. Is to run marketing at startups is really hard. And so the good news is everyone wants to talk about AI. The bad news is everyone's selling AI. And AI is not the same as SaaS. And everyone says, well, yeah, it is. No, because SaaS, you could load it and go. AI has to integrate with your data and they're like, that's why you see this sort of forward deployed engineer thing, because like you have to really understand it, you have to be able to get it in, get it moving, your data moving through the system in order for you to really understand it. So it's different. But if you think about it, everyone's pitching AI. Now there's like knows they need to go to AI, but now everyone's afraid of it. And there's also like there's a whole naysayer element in the buying committee that's like makes it even more hard. But more importantly, there's so many more products out there. And so you've got this thing, which is like, I'm here and I'm selling into my category, which by the way,
Yeah.
many people are adverse to being stuck in their categories. There are 35 other companies there. But then you have horizontal AI companies like the OpenAI's, Anthropics that are coming at you from the other side and everyone's maxing their tokens on those things. You've got other AI companies that are coming in and sort of tangentially touching your message and your value prop. And that makes the ability to distinguish yourself really hard. But I'd say, look, guys, like here's the big things are this. So one is for AI companies, many of them come into the market as a wedge, right? They found a hole in the market and they filled that hole. Now, in the SaaS era, if you found that wedge, you would be able to run with that wedge and go raise lots of money and dominate by focusing on that wedge. Now you can't because it's too easy to make software and it's too inexpensive. So you're going to have people coming at you. We like to joke, there's 4 kids in Brooklyn will create your product in a month and be coming at you. Okay. So like if you sit on that wedge now, you're actually asking to get, flanked, right? And so that is an incredible challenge. So a company today, you have to go in via your wedge, and then you have to identify, like the things that used to happen 8 years after a company existed, you have to do now. We have a guy who's an investor here who said, we've moved from TAM, so looking at the biggest market, to TAP, which is total available problem. We have to expand the problem set as fast as we
Wow.
can so that we can get in there. The other thing is like moats are really hard because like I said, it's the same problem. Building software is easier than before. And then you've got the threat of, the frontier labs, these big, Anthropic can take you out in a night and not even know you existed when everything's changed. So like, woof, your moat now is, integrating yourself into business processes and workflows as fast as you can, because that makes you harder to pull out. It's funny because I think, Salesforce, everyone's talking about the CRM and like, are there new CRMs? Except, the reason why SAP and Salesforce and these guys still don't die is because they become the business process. And tearing them out means you're tearing down your entire business process. Everyone thinks it's the data. Data moves now. You can move data in less than a day. It's actually the business process. And so there's a lot to learn there for these companies. The faster you can become integrated into their business process and become the business process, then the stickier you are and the bigger your moat can be. But like, if you don't do that, then you're easily replaceable. I talked to a RevOps leader I've respected and known for years. He said, "Oh, we look at our tech stack every month and we'll tear stuff out every 3 months." And I'm just going, "Is that good?" He's like, "Yeah, because guess what? I can always look at what's better. And if ripping and replacing is actually not that hard unless they're like dug in and into my business." So those things I think people may not know about that I think are really important to sort of take in and think about how you sell, how you message. What you do in the sales process is a lot different. And then what you do in the post-sales process is a lot different. And that's a challenge. So there's big challenges today. There's different approaches to how you think about things. And I think if I had to give you anything that I've learned, more of what I've learned from the investors looking at the market that I think I found to be fascinating.
Well, Craig, I just want to say thanks for the conversation today. It's been so great catching up with you, hearing your perspective. And, the more I listen to you, the more I just am remembering, how aligned we are in so many ways. So I just want to say thanks for joining us and being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to see you and talk to you again. I'm going to have to flip through your book again. That was one of the first B2B go-to-market books I ever read. And so it's really cool to catch up.